Hey, I got the orange sunglasses on today, so you know it's going to be a interesting episode. So let's get into it. All right, so thanks for coming back to my channel. If you don't know about the sunglasses, it's something that a few people continue to comment on in my videos. They apparently like the glasses. So anyway, when I was coming through Neal's Gap, it's around the 31, 32 mile marker of the Appalachian Trail when you're heading northbound. I happened to look in the hiker box, which I really didn't do very often at various outfitters along the trail, but this one I did, and I happened to find these sunglasses sitting in there. So I know I'm pretty rough on sunglasses. I have a tendency to lose them, break them, whatever the case is. So I figured, why not grab a second pair of glasses, because you never know, I may need them at some point. So wore them in a couple of videos. I had my original set with me and still do, but anyway, that's kind of the story behind the sunglasses. I've been asked to cover resupplying on trail, kind of my experience, and also shuttles and hostels and hotels. So that's what this video is going to be about. Hopefully it'll provide some useful information to some. I'm going to start off with resupplying. The Appalachian Trail provides numerous opportunities to resupply your food. It can be anything from rolling into town after catching a shuttle or a hitch and going to a grocery store. It can be hitting a hostel that has a resupply room right there at the hostel, or it can be hitting one of the outfitters along the trail. And the outfitters also have various resupply options for you as well. So I learned early on to look for the Ingalls grocery store chain. Apparently they're pretty well available up through certain states, and I don't know exactly, but I was just given a heads up to, if you get into an Ingalls, to grab a hold of their Advantage card, which is right here. So I did that the very first Ingalls that I went to, which was in Franklin, North Carolina. About a minute long little application, and they handed the cards right to me. So I got two of those larger cards, and I got three or four of the small little keychain fob things that you can put on your keychain. So at the time I had a tramily of 6 of us, so I was able to outfit everybody just off my card, and that's completely allowable. There's no issue with that. So I gave everybody one of those cards or keychain fob things that they could use. So long story short, if you shop at an Ingalls, they have a weekly sales ad like most grocery stores do, and everything in that weekly sales ad will be discounted using this Advantage card. Sometimes it may be stuff that you don't use on trail, but sometimes it very well may be. And I found that it actually was stuff that I would eat or take out on trail with me. So it was definitely a free, useful option to just continue to hit the Ingalls chains up the trail as you went into various towns. So that's something that I did about 4 or 5 times. The other option, as I said, is hitting the various outfitters along the trail. Sometimes it's going to be a little bit more expensive than you might find in a grocery store, but it's certainly an option, as well as the hostels. If you hit the hostels along the trail, most of them will have some type of resupply room. A lot of times it's done on the honor system. You go in there and sometimes they'll give you a piece of paper, or you can find something to write what it is that you take out of the resupply room. And when you check out of the hostel, they will add all of that up into your bill, and you just pay that amount on top of your stay or whatever else you might have done. So outfitters, I wouldn't say they were marked up too high over a grocery store, but certainly there's a little bit of markup, I guess you could say. And, they got to make a little bit of money too, so it wasn't a huge deal. So those are really the 3 main options, and there may be others. Some people, even in my tramily, had boxes sent to themselves, or someone would send them a box in a town somewhere along the trail, or maybe they would send it to a specific hostel. I knew early on I wasn't going to do that. I didn't really think that it was necessary. And to be honest, as I found out, a lot of people who had that done, they had way too much food that was sent, and then a lot of them struggled with what do I do with all this food. So a lot of times, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing, they would distribute, hey, here's everything I'm not going to take out of this box, you guys have free reign and grab what you can use, which again is wonderful. And I took advantage of that a couple of times. But oftentimes I would see them heading back out on the trail with a 6, 7, 8 pounds worth of food. And this is just, not necessarily people in my family, but just people that I took notice of who had a box shipped to them. It was just a lot of food, and they oftentimes just kind of hated to leave it or throw it away. Sometimes you can put it in a hiker box if there's one nearby, but some hiker boxes, they don't prefer you put food items in there, because sometimes mice can get in those hiker boxes and it just makes a big mess, and food can spoil and the whole deal. But I did see some food in some hiker boxes, so just kind of depended. So that was kind of, what I did. I will say I really paid close attention to the amount of food that I carried. I really worked hard on having a plan. Like, I knew when I was going to head into town or stop at a hostel for a night or whatever the case was. So I was really diligent on not carrying any more food than I had to. Absolutely had to. Sometimes I would carry maybe a half a day more, but it wasn't much more than that I would carry, because I understood that the more food I carried, the more weight it was. And the same with water. Early on the trail, had a kind of a wet early season, and there was water available everywhere. So I would only carry usually 1 liter of water right here on my chest. And when I started to get low, I would pop on the far out and look for the next water source, and I knew, within the next half mile or whatever the case was, there was potential another water source. So that's another weight savings, because water weighs 8-point-something pounds a gallon. So while it might sound trivial, I was always aware of how much water I was carrying, how much food I was carrying, and I worked very hard not to overdo it. I was proud of the pack weight that I showed up at Amicalola Falls with, which was around 27 pounds. And that was with 3 days of food and 2 liters of water. So I was proud of that, and I felt like that was part of what was going to help me be successful, was just to have a low pack weight. So anyway, that was kind of my plan, and it worked out well for me. I never went hungry, never felt like my plan blew up in my face. I always knew what I was going to do for the next resupply, so it worked out well for me. Moving on to shuttles, early on in my adventure, various family members kind of took ownership of setting up shuttles for us. So I really didn't have a big role in that early on in my hike. First 2 or 3 weeks even, I didn't do a whole lot of shuttle management or scheduling, which was nice. Eventually, as a family began to kind of break apart, as we knew that it would, I started to have to make some arrangements, which the resources that I found most valuable was Far Out. If you click on certain icons in Far Out, you can go to certain gaps where you might be looking at getting off trail for a resupply or something, and a lot of times they would give you information on shuttles in that area. Another resource that I utilized was Ramdino on YouTube. He's got a YouTube channel, and in his description box of his videos, he has a link there to a shuttle list. And I found that very useful. I'd get in there and save the document to my phone, and it even has it broken down by mile marker on the Appalachian Trail, what mile markers shuttles actually cover, and it's listed numerically, obviously, based on the mile marker. So I found that super useful and easy to use. So I used that several times, and I know there's other resources out there as well. I've heard of them, but those are the two that I tended to utilize the most. And that was the Far Out app and Ramdino's shuttle driver link in the description of his YouTube videos. I will say, when I shuttled to the Asheville airport in Asheville, North Carolina from Hot Springs the day I left trail, I found this shuttle driver by the Ramdino link to shuttle drivers, and she actually lived in Asheville, but she serviced the area of the AT of Hot Springs, and simply texted her, asked if this was something that she would be available to do, and worked flawlessly. She responded right back. We set it up, and so she drove from Asheville to Hot Springs one morning, picked me up, drove me back to Asheville, dropped me off at the airport. It was like $100, and it was 2 hours, at least 2 hours on her part. It was about almost 50-minute drive to Hot Springs, and then 50 minutes back. So I'm sure she probably spent a total of about 3 hours with me. So it was about $100, which I felt was quite fair. I gave her a nice tip because I was just happy that she was able to provide me with the service. So that's the option that I took getting to the airport in Asheville. So beyond that, hostels and hotels, I stayed at a couple times because my body was telling me I needed a break and my muscles were flat wore out, and sometimes I was dodging some poor weather. So I stayed at Standing Bear Farms. I stayed at the Grove in Franklin, North Carolina. I stayed at Around the Bend Hostel and Above the Clouds Hostel. And I also stayed in Fontana Village. And I also stayed in Gatlinburg, caught a hotel room in Gatlinburg one night because weather was getting terrible. So those are the options that I had. Obviously, if you stay at a hostel, some are a little bit nicer than others, but most of them have the majority of amenities that you're looking for, albeit a shower, space to do your laundry, to get those cleaned, power up your electronics, a resupply room, those types of things, a nice bed. Some are more crowded than others. That's just kind of how they run them. Some are more private. Some offer private rooms. You can get your own room if you desire that and have your own space, or you can go a lot cheaper and just get a bunk. Sometimes a bunk in a bunk room full of people could be $25 to $30, something like that for a night. But you get to use, like I said, all of those resources. Some hostels provide meals. Some provided a dinner. Some provided a breakfast. Some provided all 3 meals. There, specifically, you had to pay for the 3 meals. Some actually include a meal in your stay. So you just need to kind of dig into each hostel and figure out what it is you're looking for. Probably the best advice I can come up with as it gets more crowded out there is to try to book, if you can, a little bit early. Go ahead and get you a spot reserved so that you don't run into town only to find out that they're full or they're at max capacity. Would be the best advice I can give you. Hotels, obviously they're expensive. When I got into Gatlinburg, I caught a free ride and I just said, hey, just drop me off at the first hotel you come to. I'm not picky. I'm just glad to be here and get out of that weather that I was facing up there in the mountains. So I paid about $200 for that night at the hotel, but that's Gatlinburg for you, and it was right during spring break. So I mean, it is what it is. If I'd have had a lot of time, I know I could have found a cheaper option, but I didn't want to inconvenience these folks that were so nice to give me a free ride into Gatlinburg with me sitting in the back seat of their truck, calling 6 different hotels to find a cheaper rate. So that's what it is, and I was okay with that. I got a real nice room right on the main drag, super accessible to everything I needed to do. So that's kind of that. Like I said, the main thing I think is just to utilize Far Out as best you can, because it's a great resource. When people get in there and they do the social aspect of it and they leave current information, whether it's on a specific hostel or, you can find things in there based on the norovirus that's coming around, maybe how a hostel is treating people, not treating people. There's a lot of good information in there. You kind of got to look at it with a grain of salt, though, and realize that some people may post just because they're upset or angry or tired or something. But anyway, I found Far Out to be a good resource. This video's gone on long enough. I hope I provided some information that might be useful. If you have any questions beyond that, drop them down in the comment section, and I'll shoot you an answer back as best I can. And I appreciate you stopping by and joining me, and I'll see you next time around.